I ended up as an infantry company commander. I then served 7 more years in reserve service. I was wounded in service. So I did my bit in the IDF. But the IDF of the time, including the War of 73, was not the same animal that it is now. It's a different organization. You have to understand that. And to me, it's appalling.
So summarize your argument, because it's an important argument and it's an important discussion for us all to try and have. Why do you believe Israel is guilty of genocide, and why does it matter? Why is the distinction? Why is the terminology important in your view?
So, yeah, first of all, why do I think it's genocide? Genocide is something that is not easy to determine. Determination of genocide is based on the UN Convention of 1948, which provides a definition, which is the one that matters under international law. And it calls for showing that acts are being committed with the intent to destroy a particular group, ethnic, national, religious, in whole or in part as such. That's the core of the definition. So it's not about simply killing large numbers of people. It's about killing them as members of a group with the intention of destroying that group. Whether you kill all the people, members of that group or not, is another matter. That's the definition itself. Now, I reached that conclusion regarding Gaza because at the beginning of or in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, which was a massacre and a war crime and a crime against humanity and should not be condoned by anyone, in the aftermath of that, immediately there were statements being made by politicians and generals in Israel, people with executive authority, that had a genocidal content. And at the time, one could have said that those were made in the heat of the moment, in shock and horror of what was happening, but they did not really mean what they were saying. I reached the conclusion by the spring, May, June of 2024, that what the IDF was doing in Gaza was not in pursuance of the official declared war goals, which were to release the hostages and destroy Hamas. And that in fact, what the IDF was doing, it was systematically destroying Gaza in order to make it uninhabitable for its population. It was displacing people over and over again under the cover of saying that they were being moved away from war zones to safe zones, which were never actually safe. It was depriving people of food and water. And the destruction, the goal of the destruction was eventually not only to make the place uninhabitable, but to force the population, nobody knew exactly how, to leave the Gaza Strip and to make it impossible for that group, even if the war ended and the population was still there, or parts of it were, to reconstitute its identity by destroying schools, universities, mosques, museums, anything, hospitals, anything that enables a group to have its health, its identity, its education, its collective memory. Everything was being erased. And as you know, right now, as we speak, the plans are to concentrate right now they're speaking about 600,000 Palestinians who had been moved to the beach area, the Mawasi area in the southwestern Gaza, back to the ruins of Rafah, which has been totally flattened. That's a city at the southernmost corner of the Gaza Strip on the Egyptian border, to build apparently a tent city there, to enclose them there so that they wouldn't be able to leave. That is to create a huge concentration camp. And that the only way to leave it would be by leaving Gaza altogether. And the army and the state have not even made a commitment that they would feed those people. They said they would just guard the perimeter. Feeding them, taking care of them would be somebody else's business. So that is clearly an attempt at ethnic cleansing, which becomes genocidal because people have no place to go to, no place to flee to.
And is the intent, in your view, I mean, intent is very, very difficult to judge in someone, of course, notoriously. We can't have a window in people's souls. But do you think the political intent is to clear the land because Israel in the form of its government, in the form of the Netanyahu government, wants the land. That's the point that you're saying here. They want to render the land uninhabitable for the purposes of what? Of them eventually occupying it.
Yeah, so, I think when you talk about intent, first of all, curiously, in the case of what we call the war in Gaza, which is no longer a war, there is no war going on there. And there hasn't been a war going on there since June last year. What is happening there is that the IDF is mostly engaged in destroying it. They have now a new sort of military term for it. They call it ceiling to floor. That is what the IDF is either itself doing or protecting contractors who are being brought in to simply destroy one building after another, hundreds of buildings per week. So first of all, it's not really a war. What I would say, it was clear from the beginning, and that's extraordinary, it doesn't often happen, the genocidal statements or statements of intent were made right at the beginning. Usually regimes don't do that. They don't like saying that they are carrying out genocide or ethnic cleansing. They do it, but they call it something else. They say it's a war. They say it's for security reasons. But that was said right away at the beginning. I would say that probably different elements in the population and even in the government and in the IDF see these things differently. The important elements, those that really matter in the government, which are people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, with Netanyahu increasingly on their side, what they want to do is to empty Gaza of its population. They say it openly, this is no secret, to encourage people to leave, as they say, to flatten it entirely, and then to rebuild it for Jewish settlements, to bring back the settlements that were taken out of there in the mid-2000s. So that's what they want to do. People in the army may be thinking that what they're doing is simply creating a safe zone, and the only way to destroy Hamas, which, the argument is Hamas is using the population as human shields, right? That's why they have to do it. So how do you solve that problem? Well, they can't use the population as human shields if the population is gone and the whole strip is stripped of its buildings and of its population. So they may be thinking about it that way. And then finally, there is a strong sentiment in Israel, and certainly in the areas surrounding Gaza, but not only there, that they don't want the Arabs there. Because they say, if we leave them there, they're going to come back and kill and rape. And so we just want them to go. We don't know we don't care where they're going, what is happening to them. In fact, there's total indifference in Israel about what is going on in Gaza. It's not reported in the mainstream media at all. And people just want to wake up in the morning and be told they're gone. They're not there anymore.
And what about the argument, you'll have had this since you've been expressing this opinion, that no army in history has ever warned the civilian army, which is being used as a shield by Hamas, they will say, has ever given such warnings, has ever given evacuation orders, has ever taken such care to try to limit collateral damage, even as it recognizes it is going to be guilty of collateral damage. And that approach, although it leaves thousands dead, although it leaves cities in rubble, is an attempt to hit Hamas, and in doing so limit the level of collateral damage, even though there is a great deal of collateral damage that nobody can deny.
Well, what it is, I would say, is an extraordinarily successful campaign by the IDF to create a cover-up. And the cover-up has to do both with the kind of rhetoric that they use and the kind of legal language, legal apparatus that accompanies the troops. So you will notice that whenever something is reported, reaches the news, some school was hit, some group of people was killed, a number of ambulances were struck and so forth, the IDF says, well, we operate according to the rules of law and international law, and we will investigate if this was not the case. And that's the last you hear of it. So maybe it was investigated, but nobody was found guilty, and we don't know what the investigation was. There's nothing there. The same goes for this idea of what had been in the past, this sort of knock on the roof, or handing out pamphlets and saying to populations, okay, this is becoming a war zone, you have to leave. This has become a policy to displace the population, move it out of its homes, and then come in with tanks, artillery, bulldozers, demolition teams, and flatten it. This is happening right now, by the way, as we speak, in Deir al-Balah, which is the last remaining city where about 50% of the houses are still standing. It's right in the middle of the Gaza Strip on the coastal area. So it's actually a rhetoric that is meant to displace a population over and over again and then destroy everything that it was living in so that it cannot come back. And you have to understand that if you speak about, by now we are at 60,000 as a minimum killed, 140,000 or so wounded. Estimates are that probably the number of killed is well over 100,000 if you add up all the others. That's already coming up to 5% of the population, with vast numbers of people who will never recover from what they've endured since October, especially children who make up about half of the population. Just the deprivation of food, of vitamins, of any health services.
Do you think that's deliberate, Omer? Do you think that's deliberate? I mean, that's a key question in any genocidal conversation. Do you think the policy of starvation is deliberate?
The policy of starvation is definitely deliberate. It was, again, Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, said that immediately after October 7th, you will have no food, you will have no water, you will have no power. They are human animals. They have to be treated as such. Gallant and Netanyahu were indicted by the ICC for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including using starvation as a tool of war. And that is exactly what is happening now when the IDF, as of late May, created these 4 distribution points for food, of which 3 are in the south and 1 is in the center, for a population of 2 million people, obviously impossible to do. And every day, large numbers of people are being killed there because the IDF is using crowd control through live fire, tank fire, and artillery to remove populations that they believe is threatening them with live ammunition, so that well over 800 people, civilians, have been killed since late May. That's the equivalent of the number of Israeli civilians who were killed on October 7th in distribution points, in these so-called humanitarian distribution points. So they're definitely using starvation so as to move the population to the south, to encourage the population to move, because that's where the food is. And even that is being carried out in the most brutal fashion. The last one yesterday, which was the biggest killing of about 85 people right on the northern edge of the Gaza Strip. I mean, I know that area, where people were simply trying to get food and shot by tank fire as they were trying to get to trucks carrying food.
You used to be in the IDF yourself. What do you say to people who say what you're doing here, Omer, is you're giving solace to terrorists, you're giving solace to people who want to destroy Israel, and in some ways, therefore, you're articulating arguments that are ultimately harmful to the Israeli state by saying this? What do you say to people who will say that to you? I'm sure, and incidentally, I'm sure you've heard that people have said that to you. You've picked the wrong side here, Omer. This is a war. There's always casualties in war. This is about a fight for Israel's survival. Hamas are the genocidal ones. They're the ones who want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. You've picked the wrong side here.
So first of all, I was in the IDF. I spent 4 years in the IDF. I ended up as an infantry company commander. I then served several more years in reserve service. I was wounded in service. So I did my bit in the IDF. But the IDF of the time, including the War of 73, was not the same animal that it is now. It's a different organization. You have to understand that. And to me, it's appalling. And I'm not the only one, by the way, who's saying that. It's appalling what the IDF is doing. You will remember that former Minister Omer, who is a Likudnik, said what the IDF is doing are war crimes. He didn't use the G word. But he obviously recognized that what is happening on the ground are war crimes. There's no question about it. So first of all, when you observe something and you realize that there's a policy behind it and that policy is indefensible and you don't speak out, you become complicit. And there has been a huge amount of complicity in Europe, including the UK. Today, I believe the UK and France and several other countries are finally called to stop the war. As I said, there is no war, actually. It's just to stop the destruction. But it's good that they did that. But where are we now with 60,000 dead? So there has been a lot of complicit silence, and I'm not willing to be part of that complicit silence. But apart from that, I'm an Israeli citizen. I care about the state of Israel. I believe in the need for there to be an Israeli state. But the kind of state that we have now and the direction in which it is going is completely appalling. And the only way to save that state from its own demons, as it deteriorates quickly to becoming an authoritarian, full-blown apartheid state, a violent state that will turn its violence and is turning its violence not only against Palestinians, but also against anyone who does not agree with the most far-right elements in politics. The only way to prevent that is to stop what Israel is doing and to realize that you cannot solve the problem of the Palestinians, of 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Jews living between the river and the sea with bombs. They've tried it over and over again. You can kill a lot of people, but most of them stay there and they're not going anywhere. And you can only solve it politically. And the killing only makes things worse. It only creates more and more violence, more and more bitterness, more and more extremism. Only politics can solve this.
Omer, it's a really important observations you're making. Many people will agree with you. Some people will disagree with you. I know that, but it's important to articulate the argument so clearly. We're very grateful for you taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks very much for having me.
Just stay there, Omer, 1 second while we press stop on the